Hello, everyone. Mike Arnold here, co-founder, Pat Trading Partners, along with Bob Iacino, here with another weekly stock sector overview. And commodities and whatever else we cover. So, thank you for tuning in. By the way, if you are new here, please do consider subscribing, ringing that bell, and hitting the like button. All right, another retest of the lows in the market. Yes, we are still in sell mode for everything. As I mentioned also Friday, we are potentially set up for capitulation moves. That does not mean they have to happen at all. It is a possibility. What would that mean? It would be a major push to the downside, and I would let everybody know on one of our live streams if we hit one of our official capitulations. It would be down below 4,500 in the S&P. You can see S&P long way off from any medium to longer term buy signal. NASDAQ long way off, even though it did push to new lows. Still long way off from any buy signal. Dow long way off from any buy signal, and the grand quadfecta. Quadfecta, I don't think that's a word. Russell did not make new lows, holding up, but still long way from a sell signal. Technically, because we had a buy sell, we get another buy. There is an alternate rule that to prevent getting whipsawed. So I will go over that at a future time. But we're a long way off from any buy signals, period. Now, let me put up something else. Challenging conditions. I just want to show you. So this is a 1 month. And I'm using Tier 1 Alpha. I think they still have beta slots open, so you can sign up for free. Just go to their website, Tier 1 Alpha. I don't get anything not affiliated with them. I just like some of the stuff they put out. You can see this is the 1 month sector. There, besides utilities and energy and utilities, we had a sell signal trigger a couple weeks ago, and this is pulling back, but this is a month. Look, there is not a lot of areas to hide in the sectors. I want to point that out because people keep trying to buy bottoms, not necessarily people tuning to this channel, but a lot of people. Well, here's the 1 week. Energy's up here. That's the only sector that was positive. Did not mean you couldn't pick individual stocks that could make some money, but it's a challenging environment because you have the sectors dragging everything down. Here's your sector map. Now, this is for a week, 1 week performance. You can see there's still some fair amount of stocks that did okay, but you're still fighting. They're still underperforming the sectors. You know what? SMH, semiconductors, in sell, and you're going to start seeing a lot more of this coming up, and I want to talk about this. In sectors that are in sell, especially going into earnings season or continuing, it's not just for Q3 earnings, which is starting this week. AMD guided again, down 7.7% in the week. Yeah, you could say, well, look, Qualcomm's up. Well, if you're long Qualcomm, you did okay, but most of this, yeah. NVIDIA down, Intel down, AMD got crushed. Be prepared for more of that getting in. That's why it gets trickier. Because some of these, yeah, you have a couple of them up and bouncing in bear market territory, but you generally can get these guidances lower. So unless your timing is spot on, you can get caught off guard. That's why, yes, if you have daily patterns, utilize them. But you're fighting upstream. Just like look at real estate, which is in the sell. Look at this. You don't want to be trying to grab a lot of bottoms in this. And even on bounces, they can be weak. Look, Microsoft Technology had a pretty bad week. Technology here, let me get back here for the week. The week, here's technology as a sector down 4.13%. You could say, well, yeah, but Microsoft didn't do that bad for the week. It's up 0.57%. But you're fighting the current. Until you get some major long-term bottoming moves, that's why we like to lessen our position size, lessen our risk, and if there is a strong pattern, you can take advantage of it, but you're swimming against the current. Please keep that in mind with everything that's going on as I go through this. So we went through all those. XLE still in buy mode. Never tripped to sell. Never went to sell back above the 62.5 from the recent retracement. So we should still see some follow through. And from a sector perspective, at least up to close to 88. So watching for that. That is a sector. Now, some things like Exxon have gone really far, really fast. Would recommend trailing a stop because stocks can get overbought and you can still have rotation within the sector. So certain oil stocks, I'd recommend trailing stops. But energy as a whole in the sector, really nice bounce back up, back above the 62.5, should see continued higher prices. Let me just show you something else also with the XLE. Longer term, weekly rotation zone is pretty much flat. You're in a consolidation with a bullish bias coming into the monthly rotation zone and rotating up. The key area, just want to point this out because once we do get a close below the monthly rotation zone, it will probably be over for energy for a while. So pay attention. That's roughly at July 1st lows. Nothing to be worried about in the short term, but I just want to point that out, how you can use your longer term rotation zones to help fine tune stuff. So still in short term buy mode. Real estate, sell mode. Don't want to touch it. Broke last week's lows. Yes, if we get a capitulation bottom, we might get some plays in this. But, based off of last week's lows also, below the weekly 200. This is one of the last sectors I want to take a look at, even on bounces. Why do I want to pick the hard stuff to try to go into? So this is below the weekly rotation zone. Below the weekly 200 in long-term sell, forget about it. That's the best thing to do. Just forget about it. By the way, this isn't a proper pausing bar. I'm just getting an idea, though, where the next key minor support is. XLF, still in sell mode, holding up. Would not touch it if it breaks below not last week's, the prior week's low from the end of September. Not looking. Now, if we get a capitulation bottom, we'll revisit that and see what's holding up the best. Because we can get some rotation in the stuff holding up the best if we get some kind of capitulation bottom. So, XLF Financial is still on my radar screen unless we start breaking down below the end of September lows. Is it on my radar screen for buying stuff aggressively? No. Also still above looking at the long-term picture, the weekly 200. So even if we break down, roughly weekly 200, 29.70. That's major support. We start breaking below that, not looking at it, not looking. Off the table, don't even want to bother. Anything, here's the message I'm letting you know now. Anything that's in long-term sell mode and then is also below the weekly 200, don't want to touch. I just don't. There's enough stocks to look at, period, if you're trying to find something still to play in a short term, which would be an aggressive play to the upside unless we get a major bottoming or even a midterm bottoming formation. Technology, still holding up, still a little ways from the weekly 200, still in sell mode. If it starts breaking below the end of September lows, not touching it at least until it gets down to this 114.50 area, and then that would only be on technology plays that have a short-term reversal pattern. Otherwise, not looking. Now, if it stays above the end of September lows and I get a technology play that's decent and we have some overall strength in the market, at least for a little short-term bounce, I'll take a look. XLI, the industrials, long-term sell. This broke at the end of September below the lows. Yes, a little bounce, but rolling over. If it starts breaking back below this area, this is like iffy. This is maybe if it can keep holding here and we get a bottoming pattern in the markets, I'll take a look at some industrial stocks. on an outperformance mode. I'm also taking consideration, this is not something I said in the beginning. Remember, we're launching off Q3 earnings. We can get guidance with the earnings releases, and we can get, especially in this kind of market environment, misses. So I am watching everything with an eye open to earnings and not putting on any position before earnings. I would rather miss a move than get caught in a bad position. XLI, mode. That's the best I can say, but if it starts breaking down, not touching it. XLY, long-term sell. Back below the 200, yes, it's still above the June lows, but back below the 200, long-term sell. Closed a couple weeks ago below the 62.5. Should see lower price action, not touching consumer discretionary. It's a sort of a theme now. There's not many places to hide. Consumer staples, long-term sell. Made a lower low verse last week. At a key harmonic, still above the 200. If there are any consumer staples plays that are post earnings that come up, and I'm not just talking about this week, that still have a decent balance sheet, that are showing some patterns, I will look at them. Remember, a lot of consumer staples are still very, very overvalued. If we start breaking down below Friday's lows, 65 is the next key area I'm watching for. So I will look at this sector even though it's below the June lows, only if we start getting some bottoming patterns and post earnings with the plays. Healthcare, I showed you on that map, pretty big rejection. Tried to run up, but this should have done a little better in a weaker market. Healthcare, you can see, pretty big smackdown. Based off this and still in sell mode, still holding up above here. I will watch for some plays, but I have to be picky. Would rather see this now retest this low area, especially get back to 119.80 at a minimum. Then we'll look at some stronger healthcare stocks. All right, but if we start breaking below the end of September lows, I'd rather see it trying to put in a bottom around the most recent June low, major lows for June, before I really start shopping for healthcare. This was not great price action on a shorter term basis. You can see also breaking down, running up. Just if you look at this candle, at one point it was a big green candle above key prior support, becoming resistance, but look how it closed. Remember, the closing prices are the most important. Closing back below. So this was support, turning into resistance, and that resistance held on a closing basis. That, it needs to really start showing me something. If we start getting above this 123.84, might glance through some healthcare plays to see if anything stands out, but other than that, nah. XLB. Long-term sell. XLB, nice little bounce back, even with this pullback. Still holding above the 200. If we do get some kind of bottoming rally on, I will still glance around materials to see if there are some good plays. If we break back down below 66.50, nope, off the table. XLC, you know my thoughts on this, even with this little bounce play this week, not touching it. Holding this rotation for a couple weeks, but now this is we have a pausing bar. Remember, update also to the most recent pivot. Not touching it. Watching for the breakdown. You can see well below the 200, below the weekly rotation zone. Communications just is a no-go. XLU followed through from the sell signal. The arrows off the top. There we go. Holding now the key support. Really not looking at anything in XLU. It's still, I need to see some holding of this key support area before I glance around to see if there's any short-term utility plays. If we start breaking below this major support area, not real interested unless we get closer to the 200. I'm going to stay hands off. So, XLU, possibly if we were to get a bottoming pattern in the markets and we held this key support, I will glance for short-term plays. Other than that, nope. Retail, still, it's been in sell mode since January. Still in sell mode. Below the 200. Rallies, nope. Even though we're trading right at those June lows, little bounce back pattern, you see it got rejected by the rotation zone in the 200. Not interested unless we can, and consumers going into a rough patch with credit usage and savings being down, even though it's holiday season. I think it's a gamble to try to play a lot of retail unless it's a bargain retail, but even they can get hit. So I'd rather steer clear of it. IYT transportation, we'll start here. It's in sell mode. Actually, it's in sell mode. Below June lows, below the 200. Not touching it. Semis. See, this is where it gets challenging. You see, I talked about semis in the because you're going to get stuff like AMD. Now, AMD got their guidance out of the way, but I think you're going to see more guidance lower. We're closing in. We're holding that 200 on the weekly. We are in long-term sell with this system. We are in long-term sell from a topping pattern, and we're in long-term sell from below us from a breakdown level. We're holding barely the 200. To finish the one pattern, it needs to go to 180. 179.56 is the next key, 62.5. We get a weekly close below that. I'm targeting much lower prices. I think you're gambling to play semis unless you have a semi at decent valuation. I've thrown out Intel that also pays a dividend, and you're willing to establish a long-term position and also be willing to possibly harvest some option premium against it, like with covered calls, or if you're willing to get in it with some cash secured puts. Other than that, we're at a very critical level in semis, so it's risky to get anything aggressive on semis. I'd rather, unless it's a longer term play, steer clear of it. Commodities, DBC. Come on, commodities. Still, we never triggered a sell mode, so it's still in long-term buy. Been in long-term buy since August of 20. This did not tip it into sell mode. So, that's what commodities are still in play. Now, if we roll down and break below, it was also bouncing off the 62.5, break down below that, this will be in sell mode for multiple things. So commodities are still in play, but they're a tight stop. Commodities, again, holding at the 50-week now, back above the 50-week. But this is, I got to be picky with commodity plays. Agriculture, still in buy mode. Got to be picky. Still can't get back above 2079. So got to be still picky with agriculture as a subset of commodities. And you see weekly rotation zones starting to get some separation, but that's at 2076, 2079 area. Need to get a play above there from the sector point of view before I'm really bullish with the bounce in gold, but no follow through. Still watching for a longer term bottoming pattern, but nothing yet. VTV Vanguard Value, and this is where you got to be nimble trying to do the plays. Little bounce back play, slamming into the weekly rotation zone, rotating back down. Now it is value still. There's not a lot of good long-term valuations for value. This is why you have to be so nimble. Still above the 200, below June lows, in mode. I will look if we get a bottoming pattern back at value, but then you got to be really nimble. Growth could not, still holding June lows. I say this was a potential play. We got the little play up there, but now back below the 200 on the closing basis. If this breaks below June lows, growth is pretty much off the radar screen unless we get a capitulation bottom. There's just not a lot of great areas to hide. So I guess my overall message is you got to be really picky. If you get in some plays, you got to be aggressive moving up your stops because anything could happen with earnings and or guidance in this market. If you want to filter stuff out, things in sell mode that are also below the weekly 200 simple, just take off your screen. Just say, okay, you'll eliminate a number of stocks that way and really limit your universe, but you'll also really consolidate your universe into a smaller set of potential plays. So that's where we sit. I wanted to just overall show how you can combine the overall system with some weekly concepts, rotation zone, and the weekly 200, and also showing you with some other metrics with weekly and monthly sectors how you got to be so fine-tuning stuff. So it's really tough right now. I'd rather keep more gunpowder dry unless you find a spectacular play. That's where I'll leave it for right now. I will talk to everybody in the next weekly sector overview. And for those who can attend the live stream, please do and say hi. Let me know if you've also watched the weekly sector overview. Talk to you later. Bye for now.